Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing on the surface of a world at the ragged edge of civilized space. You are a farmer, perhaps, or a laborer in one of the vast manufactorums that churn out goods for a distant empire you will never see. You have lived your entire life beneath the same grey sky, breathing the same recycled air, following the same rituals your parents followed before you, and their parents before them. You worship a god you have never met. You serve an empire you barely understand, and pay your tithes without complaint, because that is what is expected of you. That is what keeps the soldiers away from your door, and the food rations flowing into your hab block. But lately, something has changed. It started with the dreams. Vivid, impossible visions that bled into your waking hours and left you gasping in the dark of your sleeping chamber. You heard voices when no one was speaking. You saw lights that no one else could see. Sometimes, but when the emotions ran high in the crowded manufactorum floor, you could feel the thoughts of the workers around you pressing against the inside of your skull, their frustrations and fears and desperate little hopes all tangling together into a noise so loud you wanted to scream. You did not choose this. You did not ask for it. But the powers stirring inside of you do not care what you want. They are growing, day by day, and you cannot make them stop. And then one morning, you wake to find the sky has changed. There is a shadow overhead that was not there the night before. It is not a cloud. It is not a storm. It is something far, far worse. The planetary governor has received a transmission, and within hours, announcements are ringing through the streets and hab blocks of every city on the world. The message is simple. It is ancient, and it carries with it a weight of dread that has crushed the spirits of billions of souls across 10,000 years of human history. The black ships have come. That name alone is enough to silence a crowd. It is enough to make grown men weep and mothers clutch their children to their chests, as if the sheer force of their love could somehow hide the truth of what is happening. Because when the black ships come, they come for people like you, people with the gift, the curse, as the affliction that the Imperium of man has spent its entire existence trying to control. They come for the psykers, and once you are taken aboard, you will never see your home again. You will not be told where you are going. You will not be given a reason that makes sense to a frightened human being who has done nothing wrong except exist with a genome that decided, without asking permission, to wire your brain differently than everyone else around you. You will be taken from your family, from your friends, from every person and place you have ever known. You will be placed in chains, loaded into a shuttle, and carried up through the atmosphere of the world that bore you, watching through a tiny porthole as the only sky you have ever known shrinks to a pale blue dot and then disappears entirely. And then you will be aboard the black ship, and the silence of space will be replaced by something much, much worse. Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we are going to talk about what might be the single most terrifying element of the entire Warhammer 40,000 universe. Not the ravenous swarms of the Tyranids, not the howling tide of greenskin savagery, not even the whispering corruption of chaos itself. We are going to talk about the Black Ships, the dread vessels of the League of Black Ships, belonging to the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, that form the second largest fleet in the entire galaxy. A fleet so vast that only the highest-ranking officials in the Imperium know its true size. A fleet that has been sailing the stars since before the Horus Heresy, collecting a cargo more precious and more dangerous than anything else in all of human space. These are ships built from psychically resistant ebony metal, covered in ancient wardings that siphon away the energies of the warp itself. They are crewed by individuals whose mental fortitude has been tested to the breaking point and beyond, and who are regularly subjected to mind-scrubbing procedures to purge any psychic taint they might have absorbed. They carry aboard them the Sisters of Silence, those haunting, wordless women who bear the pariah gene in their blood. Women who cast no shadow in the warp, and whose very presence is enough to snuff out psychic abilities the way a candle flame dies in a hurricane. And in their holds, chained and drugged and subjected to an unending assault of noise and psychic disruption, here are thousands upon thousands of human beings whose only crime was being born different, born with a connection to a dimension of pure psychic energy that most people cannot see, cannot feel, and cannot comprehend. These are the psykers of the Imperium, and they are being shipped to Holy Terror for one of two fates. Either they will be deemed strong enough to serve the Imperium as sanctioned psykers, astropaths, or battlefield weapons, or they will be fed to the Golden Throne, their life energies consumed by the shattered remains of the Emperor of Mankind, so that his fading psychic light can continue to shine across 50,000 light-years of empty space. That is the Black Ships. That is their purpose. And tonight, we are going to explore every corner of their existence, from their origins in the earliest days of the Imperium to the crisis that has engulfed them in the current era. We will walk through their darkened corridors, stand in their cavernous holds, and listen to the wailing of souls who know that their journey has only one destination. We will meet the crews who sail these vessels, the warriors who guard them, and the ancient institutions that command them. And by the end, I think you will understand why, in a galaxy filled with horrors beyond counting, the arrival of a single black ship in a planetary system is enough to inspire a dread that cuts deeper than any blade. So settle in, get comfortable, and let us begin at the beginning. In an age when humanity was clawing its way back from the edge of extinction, and a being of unimaginable power decided that the galaxy's psykers needed to be brought to heel. The story of the Black Ships begins, as so many stories in Warhammer 40,000 begin, with the Emperor of Mankind. But to understand why the Black Ships were created, we first need to understand the problem they were designed to solve. And that problem is older than the Imperium itself. Long before the Emperor united Terra under his rule, long before the Great Crusade carried his armies to the farthest stars, humanity was already grappling with the growing prevalence of psykers among its population. During the age of technology, that mythic golden era when mankind had spread across the galaxy and built wonders that the 41st millennium could scarcely imagine, psykers had begun to appear in greater and greater numbers. This was not a coincidence. It was, many scholars believe, as an evolutionary development, a gradual awakening of humanity's latent psychic potential that had been building for millennia. But evolution does not always produce beneficial results, especially not when the power in question draws its strength from a dimension of pure psychic energy populated by malevolent entities that feed on emotion and hunger for the souls of the living. The warp, that swirling ocean of nightmares that exists parallel to our own reality, is not merely a source of power for psykers. It is a hunting ground. And every time a psyker reaches out with their mind, every time they channel the energies of the immaterium to read a thought or move an object or glimpse the future, they are essentially lighting a beacon in the darkest depths of that ocean, drawing the attention of things that should never be named. During the Age of Strife, the catastrophic period that followed the collapse of humanity's golden age, and the consequences of this uncontrolled psychic awakening became horrifyingly apparent. Across thousands of worlds, untrained and unsanctioned psykers became gateways for demonic possession. Entire civilizations were consumed from within as sorcerer kings and demon-possessed witches rose to power, their abilities amplified by the warp energies that poured through them like water through a broken dam. Planets that had been bastions of human culture and learning became nightmare realms where the laws of physics no longer applied, and the screams of the damned echoed through streets that had once been filled with laughter and commerce. On Terra itself, the situation was perhaps worse than anywhere else. The cradle of humanity had become a hellscape of warring techno-barbarian states, many of them ruled by warlords who had used their psychic abilities to carve out petty empires built on fear and the raw power of the warp. These sorcerer kings and witch tyrants had demonstrated, in the most brutal and undeniable fashion possible, exactly what happened when psykers were left to their own devices. Cities burned. Populations were enslaved. Reality itself became unreliable, twisting and warping in the presence of unchecked psychic power until the boundaries between the material world and the Imperium grew thin enough for things from the other side to push through. The common people of this era developed a deep, abiding terror of psykers that was not superstition. It was survival instinct. They had seen what happened when a psyker lost control. They had watched their neighbors be consumed by warp fire. Their bodies twisted into shapes that the human mind was not designed to comprehend. They had heard the screams of the possessed, the terrible voices that came from human mouths, but spoke with the cadences of things that had never been human and never would be. The fear of psykers was not irrational. It was one of the most rational fears a human being could possess. This was the world the Emperor inherited when he began his campaign to reunify terror. A world where psykers were rightfully feared, where the word witch was a death sentence in most cultures, and where the memory of what uncontrolled psychic power could do was still fresh enough to inspire a visceral, primal terror in anyone who heard it spoken. The Emperor understood this fear because he, more than anyone else alive, understood what psykers truly were and what they were capable of. He was, after all, the most powerful psyker in human history. He knew the warp better than any living soul. What he had walked its depths and faced its horrors and emerged intact, something that no other being could claim. And so, even before the Great Crusade began, the Emperor set about creating the infrastructure that would allow him to manage humanity's growing psychic population. The first step was the construction of the Astronomicon, that colossal psychic beacon on Terra that would serve as a lighthouse in the warp, guiding the navigators of Imperial ships through the Imperium's treacherous currents. The Astronomicon was originally powered by the Emperor's own psychic might, but as the demands of the Great Crusade grew, a compromise was reached. The beacon would still be directed by the Emperor's mind, but the raw energy needed to sustain it would be provided by the psychic and life energies of 10,000 sacrificial psykers. The Emperor agreed to this arrangement with great reluctance, insisting that it was only a temporary measure. He had no intention, he said, of claiming the lives of thousands of innocent men and women on a regular basis. History, of course, had other plans. The second element of the Emperor's grand design was the creation of the Astra Telepathica, a specialized corps of interstellar telepathic communicators who would serve as the nervous system of his growing Imperium. The idea was born during the final months of the Unification Wars, when the Emperor foresaw that any interstellar empire, no matter how powerful its military forces, would collapse without a reliable means of communication across the vast distances that separated its component worlds. Standard voidcraft communication was limited by the speed of light, rendering it useless across interstellar distances. The warp, for all its dangers, offered a solution. Psychic signals could cross the Imperium at speeds that made light seem sluggish by comparison, and allowing messages to be transmitted from one side of the galaxy to the other in days or weeks rather than centuries. These astropaths, as they came to be known, were psykers who had been carefully tested, trained, and soul-bound to the Emperor himself, a ritual that transferred some of the Emperor's enormous psychic strength and mental discipline into the psyker's mind, protecting them from the predatory entities of the warp. The soul-binding process was agonizing, as often leaving the psyker permanently blind as their optical nerves were burned out by the sheer intensity of the Emperor's psychic presence. But it was effective. Soul-bound astropaths could communicate across vast interstellar distances, transmitting not words but empathic impressions, symbolic visions, and emotional resonances that could be interpreted by trained receivers on distant worlds. The system was imperfect, certainly. Messages could be garbled by warp interference, delayed by storms in the Imperium, or intercepted by psykers aligned with hostile forces. But it was the best available option, and it gave the Imperium something that no other human civilization had possessed since the fall of the old galactic network: a way to talk to itself across the void. But for every psyker strong enough and disciplined enough to serve as an astropath, there were hundreds who were too weak, too unstable, or too dangerous to be trusted with any kind of freedom. As these were the rogue psykers, the unsanctioned witches, the ticking bombs of psychic potential that could go off at any moment, opening rifts in reality through which the horrors of the warp could pour into the material universe. Something had to be done with them. They could not be left to roam free. They could not all be killed, though many certainly were. And so the Emperor created the League of Black Ships. The concept was simple in its brutality. And a fleet of specially constructed vessels would travel continuously throughout the Imperium, visiting every inhabited world on a regular rotation. When a black ship arrived in a system, the planetary governor would be instructed to prepare the customary levy, a tithe of psykers collected by local authorities and held in fortified facilities until the ship came to claim them. The psykers would then be loaded aboard the black ship, transported across the galaxy to Terra, and sorted. Those deemed strong enough and stable enough would be trained as sanctioned psykers, soul-bound to the Emperor, and put to work serving the Imperium in various capacities. Those who were not strong enough, those who were too weak or too vulnerable to resist the predations of the warp, would be consigned to the Adeptus Astronomica, where their psychic energies would feed the Astronomicon until their life forces were entirely consumed. To carry out this grim mission, the Emperor tasked a very specific group of warriors with manning and protecting these vessels. They were known, even in those earliest days, as the Sisters of Silence. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica sits at the heart of the Imperium's management of its psychic population, and the League of Black Ships is one of its two primary divisions. The other is the Scholastia Sicana, which handles the actual training and sanctioning of psykers once they arrive on Terra. Together, these two organizations form a machine of staggering scale, a galaxy-spanning apparatus for the identification, collection, transportation, evaluation, and ultimate disposal of every single human being born with psychic abilities across 1 million worlds. The scope of this operation is almost impossible to comprehend. There are many thousands of black ships in active service at any given time, though the exact number is one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets. Only the highest-ranking adepts within the Astra Telepathica know the true scale of the fleet and the full extent of its operations. New vessels are constantly being commissioned to replace the inevitable losses incurred by the nature of their mission, because sailing the warp with a cargo hold full of untrained psykers is about as safe as juggling live grenades in a room full of open flame. Ships are lost. Entire crews are consumed. His psykers break free of their restraints and tear holes in reality that swallow everything around them. It is a dangerous business, and the attrition rate is not something the Astra Telepathica likes to discuss in polite company. What we do know is that the League of Black Ships is the second largest fleet in the entire galaxy, surpassed only by the Imperial Navy itself. They operate independently of the Navy, answering directly to the master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and his council of several hundred senior officials. The fleet is based from the Magadan orbital construct in the Sol system, a vast space station that serves as the central hub for the fleet's operations, the place where routes are planned, supplies are distributed, and the constant flow of psykers arriving from across the galaxy is managed and directed to the appropriate facilities on the surface of Terra below. The organizational structure of the Astra Telepathica is split cleanly between its two halves. The League handles the collection side of things, the actual process of traveling to Imperial worlds, gathering psykers and transporting them back to Terra. The Scholastia Sicana handles what happens after they arrive. It is within the gloomy towers and fortified training halls of the Scholastia that psykers are evaluated, tested, and ultimately sorted into the categories that will determine the rest of their lives, or in many cases, the manner of their deaths. The master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica oversees both divisions. This individual is often a potent psyker in their own right, someone who has survived the soul-binding ritual and risen through the ranks of the organization through a combination of psychic power, political cunning, and sheer force of will. But the position comes with a seat on the Senatorum Imperialis, the Council of High Lords of Terra that governs the Imperium in the Emperor's name, which gives the master enormous political influence and ensures that the needs of the Astra Telepathica are always represented at the highest levels of Imperial governance. Below the Master, the fleet operates through a hierarchy of captains, senior adepts, and specialized personnel who manage the day-to-day operations of each individual black ship. The captains are invariably senior members of the Astra Telepathica, individuals who have spent decades or even centuries learning the intricacies of psyker management and void-faring operations. They are the ones who make the initial evaluation of the psyker cargo collected from each world, sorting the strong from the weak, the salvageable from the damned, before the ship moves on to the next world in its circuit. As the relationship between the Astra Telepathica and the Inquisition is particularly noteworthy. The Inquisition has secured formal rites of passage aboard the black ships, allowing Inquisitors to travel freely throughout the entire fleet. This arrangement benefits both organizations. For the Inquisition, it provides a convenient means of travel and an excellent opportunity to investigate worlds for signs of psychically based corruption. For the Astra Telepathica, the Inquisition's presence serves as an additional layer of oversight, ensuring that planetary governors are not withholding psykers from the tithe and that the Emperor receives his due. Many Inquisitors who travel aboard the black ships are themselves psykers, individuals who were plucked from the teeming masses of humanity by the very fleet they now ride. They understand firsthand what the black ships represent, both the horror of being collected and the necessity of the collection. Yes, it creates a strange dynamic, a kind of institutional loyalty born from shared trauma, where former cargo becomes guardian, and the hunted become the hunters. Beyond the Inquisition, very few Imperial agents are permitted aboard these vessels. Occasionally, Space Marines, Sisters of Battle, or high-ranking members of the Adeptus Terra may be granted passage at the discretion of the ship's captain, but such instances are rare. The black ships are, by design and by tradition, home places of isolation and secrecy. What happens within their hulls is not meant for common knowledge. The Imperium's citizens know that the black ships exist. They know that the ships come for psykers, and they know that those taken aboard rarely return. The specifics of what happens during the journey, the conditions in the holds, the fate that awaits the cargo upon arrival at Terra, these are details that most Imperial citizens will never learn and would probably prefer not to. Or this institutional secrecy serves multiple purposes. It maintains the aura of fear and dread that surrounds the black ships, making them more effective as a deterrent against worlds that might consider hiding their psykers from the tithe. It protects the Imperium from the uncomfortable questions that might arise if the general population understood exactly how many psykers are sacrificed to the Golden Throne every single day. And it shields the crews and operators of the black ships from the kind of moral scrutiny that might erode their ability to perform their duties. Because make no mistake, the crew of a black ship knows exactly what they are carrying, and they know exactly where it is going. That knowledge is a weight that would crush most people. The fact that these crews continue to function day after day, year after year, century after century, and is a testament to either their extraordinary mental resilience or their extraordinary capacity for compartmentalization. Perhaps both. Now, let us talk about the ships themselves, because the physical construction of a black ship is as much a part of their story as anything that happens within their walls. These are not ordinary vessels. They are not repurposed cargo haulers or converted warships given a fresh coat of paint and a new designation. So black ships are purpose-built instruments of containment and transportation, designed from the keel up for the singular task of carrying the most dangerous cargo in the galaxy across the most treacherous medium of travel known to exist. The first thing you would notice about a black ship, if you are unfortunate enough to see one, is the color, or rather, the absence of color. These vessels are constructed from a psychically resistant ebony metal. It's a material so dark that it seems to drink in the light around it, creating the impression of a void moving through space rather than a solid object. They are covered from prow to stern in intricate anti-psychic wardings, both hexagrammic and pentagrammic in nature, that have been painstakingly etched, carved, and inscribed into every surface of the hull. These wardings are not decorative, they are functional. They serve to siphon away the energies of the immaterium, dissipating them into heat, a light and harmless static discharges before they can accumulate to dangerous levels. Think about what that means for a moment. The hull of a black ship is literally designed to bleed the warp dry. Every panel, every plate, every rivet and seam has been treated with the kind of psychic fortification that most Imperial installations reserve for their most sacred reliquaries and most secure prison cells. The entire ship is, in essence, a cage built to contain not bodies, but minds, not flesh, but power. The raw, screaming, untamed power of the warp as it courses through the veins of thousands of terrified human beings locked in the holds below. The wardings themselves come in two primary types. Hexagrammic wards are designed to protect against psychic attacks by siphoning away the energy of the immaterium and channeling it into harmless static discharges. These are the wards that every sanctioned psyker becomes intimately familiar with during their time aboard a black ship, because their effect is constant, pervasive, and deeply unpleasant. Psykers who have survived the journey describe the sensation of hexagrammic wardings as being like a persistent pressure behind the eyes, a feeling of being slowly squeezed by invisible hands that never relax their grip. The wards do not cause physical pain, not exactly, but they create a sensation of wrongness, of disconnection, that is profoundly distressing for anyone who has grown accustomed to the constant background hum of the warp that most psykers experience throughout their lives. Pentagrammic wards serve a different but complementary purpose. Where hexagrammic wards protect against psychic attacks, pentagrammic wards defend against demonic manifestation. They repel the presence of demons and protect against the corrupt energies that such entities wield. The existence of pentagrammic wards is technically a secret, known only to those within the Inquisition and the highest levels of the Adeptus Ministorum and the tech priests of the machine god, because the existence of demons is itself prescribed knowledge. But aboard a black ship, where the risk of demonic incursion is constant and severe, the use of pentagrammic wardings is considered essential. The holds where thousands of untrained psykers are imprisoned represent, but from a demonic perspective, one of the most attractive targets in the galaxy, a concentrated mass of psychic energy and emotional distress that draws the predators of the warp the way blood in the water draws sharks. The combination of these two types of wardings creates an environment that is actively hostile to both psychic activity and demonic presence. It is a fortress of negation, a place where the warp's influence is systematically stripped away and neutralized, but leaving behind only the cold, dead weight of material reality. For a psyker, being inside this environment is like being slowly suffocated, cut off from the very thing that makes them who they are, their sixth sense blinded, their psychic muscles paralyzed, their connection to the vast ocean of the immaterium reduced to a trickle too faint to be of any use. The construction of these vessels is undertaken primarily at the orbital shipyards of Mars itself, though records suggest that other facilities have contributed to their production over the millennia. The exacting standards and particular specifications required to build a black ship mean that the process is extraordinarily expensive and time-consuming even by Imperial standards. Each vessel must meet requirements that go far beyond the standard naval specifications for hull integrity, weapon systems, and void shielding. Every component must be tested for psychic resonance. Every material must be vetted for its ability to resist warp contamination. And every ward must be verified by trained adepts who specialize in the arcane arts of hexagrammic and pentagrammic protection. The result is a vessel that is, in many ways, the antithesis of everything the warp represents. Where the warp is chaos, the black ship is order. Where the warp is emotion, the black ship is cold, calculated restraint. Where the warp is freedom, terrible and destructive freedom, the black ship is confinement in its most absolute form. To a psyker, being aboard a black ship must feel something like being buried alive inside a coffin made of lead, cut off from the very thing that makes you who you are, your connection to the immaterium reduced to a faint whisper by the wardings and containment measures that surround you on every side. The interior of a black ship is divided into distinct zones, and each designed to serve a specific function in the management and containment of the psyker cargo. The upper decks house the bridge, the crew quarters, and the various administrative and command facilities needed to operate the vessel during its long voyages. Psychically sensitive crew members, of which there are surprisingly many given the nature of the ship's mission, spend most of their time in these shielded upper sections, as far removed from the containment holds as possible. The anti-psychic security measures in the lower decks are so intense that even trained adepts find them deeply unpleasant to be around for extended periods. Below the crew decks lie the containment holds themselves, vast, cavernous spaces that have been described in surviving accounts as being the size of temple naves. A single black ship can carry thousands of psykers in these holds, though the exact capacity varies from vessel to vessel depending on its size and configuration. Yet the holds are lined with the same psychically resistant materials that make up the hull, creating an environment that is actively hostile to psychic activity. The walls hum with barely perceptible energy, the wardings giving off a low, constant vibration that some psykers describe as being like a needle driven slowly into the base of the skull. The weapons systems of a black ship deserve mention as well. Because of the enormous value that the ship's cargo represents, as both to the Imperium and to its enemies, black ships are armed with weapons comparable to frontline warships. A black ship is not a defenseless transport. It is a vessel capable of engaging and destroying threats that would give a standard naval escort pause. The reasoning behind this is straightforward and grim. A black ship carrying thousands of psykers is, from the perspective of Chaos or the Dark Eldar, one of the most valuable prizes in the galaxy. A successful raid on a black ship would net the attacker an enormous supply of psychic raw material that could be used for all manner of horrific purposes, from fueling dark rituals to feeding the hunger of predatory warp entities. The Imperium cannot afford to lose even a single black ship to enemy action, and so these vessels are built to fight as well as to carry. Beyond their own considerable armament, black ships rarely travel alone, and it is standard practice for a black ship to be accompanied by a heavy escort of naval vessels, creating a convoy that would give any would-be attacker serious pause. The combination of the black ship's own weapons, its escort force, and the fearsome reputation of the fleet as a whole means that attacks on black ships are exceedingly rare. But they do happen, and when they do, the consequences are invariably catastrophic, not just for the attackers, but for everyone involved. The ships themselves are ancient. Many black ships have been in continuous service for centuries or even millennia, their hulls bearing the scars of countless voyages through the warp and the accumulated layers of wardings and repairs that come with such extreme age. There is something fitting about this, something almost poetic, in the idea that these vessels have been collecting humanity's cursed offspring for longer than most civilizations have existed. And they are institutions as much as they are ships, repositories of knowledge and tradition and grim purpose that have survived the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, and the endless turning of the galaxy's great wheel of war. Every so often, one of these ancient vessels is finally retired, its hull too damaged or its systems too degraded to continue service. When this happens, the ship is stripped of its wardings and components, which are recycled into the construction of a new vessel, and the empty hull is either broken up for salvage or, in some cases, set adrift in the void as a tomb, a monument to the millions of souls who passed through its holds on their way to whatever fate awaited them on Holy Terror. It is a grim ending for a grim vessel. But then, the black ships have never been places of joy or celebration. They are instruments of necessity, and tools designed to perform a task that no one enjoys but everyone acknowledges must be done. And in the grim darkness of the far future, that is often the best that can be said about anything. If the black ships are the physical vessels that carry out the Imperium's psyker collection, then the Sisters of Silence are their spiritual guardians. These warrior women, clad in golden Vratine armor and wielding executioner-great blades and bolters with equal proficiency, are among the most unique and least understood forces in the entire Imperium. They are blanks, every single one of them, human beings who bear the pariah gene in their blood and who therefore cast no shadow in the warp. They are, in the most literal sense possible, invisible to psychic perception. And more than that, their very presence is anathema to psykers, disrupting psychic abilities and nullifying warp energies the way a black hole devours light. The origins of the Sisters of Silence are somewhat shrouded in mystery, which is fitting for an organization that has made silence its defining virtue. What we know is that they first appeared during the early years of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor recognized that the primaris psykers of the Astra Telepathica were proving insufficient to control captured psykers during the collection process. A better solution was needed, and from that need, the Silent Sisterhood was born. Some accounts suggest that the Sisters' origins stretch back even further, to some lost agency of the Dark Age of technology, whose purpose and methods have been forgotten by all but the most obscure historical records. What is clear is that the Emperor saw the potential of the pariah gene and created an entire military order around it. The Sisters of Silence operated from the Somnus Citadel on Luna, the moon of Terra, serving as the militant arm of the Astra Telepathica under the formal designation of the Departamento Investigates. Their formal name, the Anathema Psykana, tells you everything you need to know about their purpose. They were, quite literally, the bane of psykers, a weapon forged specifically to counter the most dangerous threat that humanity had ever faced from within its own ranks. During the Great Crusade, the Sisters proved themselves again and again in some of the most critical engagements of the era, when the Thousand Suns Legion, one of the Emperor's own Space Marine legions, was judged guilty of sorcerous practices and sentenced to destruction during the burning of Prospero. It was the Sisters of Silence who provided the critical edge that allowed the attacking forces to prevail. Their pariah gene neutralized the formidable psychic abilities of the Thousand Suns, creating zones of psychic dead space on the battlefield where the Sons of Magnus found themselves suddenly and terrifyingly mortal, their warp-fueled defenses collapsing in the presence of women who cast no shadow in the Imperium. The Sisters were more than capable of fighting against the superhuman Astartes, despite their baseline human physiology, their Vratine armor and executioner great blades more than a match for the disoriented and depowered sorcerers they faced. During the catastrophic war within the Webway, when demons poured through the breach that Magnus had torn in the Emperor's psychic shields and threatened to overwhelm Terra itself, the Sisters fought alongside the Adeptus Custodes in a desperate holding action that lasted years. Their presence was essential, their pariah gene suppressing the worst manifestations of demonic power and providing the Custodes with stable ground from which to launch their counterattacks. Many Sisters died in those tunnels beneath Terra, their sacrifice buying time for the Emperor to maintain the psychic barriers that kept the demonic tide at bay.
Now, real quick, I just want to say, this is one of those topics that genuinely caught me off guard when I first got into the lore. I remember reading about the Black Ships for the first time and thinking, okay, this is hands down the darkest thing in 40k. Not because of gore or battle, but because how institutional it is. It's not a monster hunting you, it's a paperwork. Your entire existence reduced to a line item on some governor's ledger. That's what makes the Black Ships hit different for me personally, and honestly, it's a big reason that I wanted to cover this topic for you guys. But anyways, let's continue the video.
And during the Siege of Terra itself, the climactic battle of the Horus Heresy, the Sisters of Silence served alongside the Custodes, the Imperial Fists, the Blood Angels, and the White Scars in the defense of the Imperial Palace. Their anti-psychic abilities proved invaluable against the demonic forces unleashed by the traitor legions, and their willingness to sacrifice everything in defense of the Emperor earned them a place in the annals of Imperial history that should have been honored for eternity. It was not. Their structure was built around three commanding officers: the Sister Commander, who led the Sisterhood as a whole, the Mistress of the Black Fleet, who oversaw the collection of the Great Tithe and served as the Grand Admiral of the Sisters' Fleet, and the Black Ships of the Astra Telepathica, and the Nemesis Praxia, who served as the keeper of the Sisterhood's knowledge and managed the training of new recruits. Below these leaders, the sisterhood was divided into 4 distinct chambers. The Chamber of Vigilance, the largest division, handled garrison duties and the collection of the great tithe on individual worlds. The Chamber of Oblivion served as the elite combat wing, housing the strongest pariahs and most experienced warriors. The Chamber of Judgment acted as the sisterhood's secret police, tracking down and eliminating high-risk psykers and those who sheltered them. And the Chamber of Astra captained and guarded the black ships themselves. It is this last chamber that is most relevant to our discussion, because the Chamber of Astra holds a unique distinction in the history of the Sisters of Silence. While the rest of the sisterhood was scattered and marginalized following the Horus heresy, eventually fading from public knowledge to the point where many believed they had gone extinct entirely, the Chamber of Astra never stopped operating. Throughout 10,000 years of upheaval, political turmoil, and institutional neglect, the sisters assigned to the black ships continued their work without interruption. They continued to hunt psykers, to guard the holds, and to ensure that the Emperor's tithe was collected and delivered. They were, in a very real sense, the last unbroken thread connecting the modern Imperium to the Emperor's original vision for the management of humanity's psychic population. The pariah gene that defines the Sisters of Silence is itself a subject of enormous speculation and study, though the Emperor long ago placed a moratorium on most attempts to isolate or reproduce it, after early experiments by the Imperial Architechnologist course and the Mechanicum courted disaster. What is known is that the gene, if it can truly be called a single gene, creates in its bearer a state of psychic nullity. A Sister of Silence has no presence in the warp whatsoever. She cannot be detected by telepathy, cannot be affected by psychic powers, and cannot be targeted by the precognitive abilities of psykers or warp entities. To a psyker, being in the presence of a Sister of Silence is a profoundly disturbing experience, like standing next to a hole in reality, a void where there should be a soul. This ability, known variously as being an untouchable, a null, a pariah, or a blank, is incredibly valuable for the black ship's mission. The sisters can move through the containment holds without any fear of being affected by the psykers imprisoned there. They can restrain even the most powerful of witches simply by standing close enough for their anti-psychic aura to suppress the psyker's abilities. And in cases where a psyker breaks free of their restraints and begins to channel the warp, the sisters can shut down the threat instantly, either through their nullifying presence or, if necessary, through the application of their executioner great blades to the psyker's neck. Yet the dynamic between a Sister of Silence and the psykers she guards is one of the strangest and most psychologically complex relationships in the entire Imperium. The psykers fear the sisters, instinctively and completely, because the sister represents the annihilation of everything that makes the psyker who they are. In the presence of a sister, a psyker feels diminished, hollowed out, and as if the core of their being is being sucked away into a void that they cannot see, but can feel pressing against them from all directions. It is a deeply personal kind of fear, more intimate and more disturbing than the fear of physical harm, because it strikes at the psyker's fundamental sense of self. The sister does not merely threaten to kill the psyker. Her very existence threatens to unmake the psyker, to reduce them to something less than what they are, a human being stripped of the one quality that sets them apart from the billions of mundane souls who populate the Imperium's worlds. The sisters themselves are trained to use this fear as a tool. They move through the holds with deliberate, measured steps, their silence speaking louder than any threat. They do not need to raise their voices. They do not need to brandish their weapons. Their mere presence is enough to quell most disturbances. Doubt the psyker's instinctive aversion to the pariah gene, driving them back into their chains without a hand being laid on them. It is a form of control that is almost elegant in its simplicity, a system where the jailer does not need to use force because the prisoner's own biology does the jailer's work for them. But the pariah gene comes with a terrible cost. Those who bear it are universally reviled by other human beings. There is something in the human psyche that recoils from the presence of a null, an instinctive visceral revulsion that cannot be overcome through reason or familiarity. normal people feel deeply uncomfortable around Sisters of Silence, experiencing sensations of dread, nausea, and wrongness that have nothing to do with the Sisters' appearance or behavior, and everything to do with the fundamental alienness of a soul-shaped absence in the fabric of the warp. Even other Space Marines, but the mightiest warriors in the galaxy, are known to feel unsettled in the company of the Silent Sisterhood. This universal rejection made the post-heresy period particularly brutal for the Sisters. After the Emperor was interred upon the Golden Throne and the Imperium descended into the chaos of the Scouring, the rising influence of the Imperial cult led many to view the Sisters with suspicion and outright hostility. Some were called witches, ironically enough, and persecuted by the very populations they had sworn to protect. The Sisters who had been killed during the Siege of Terror were dug up, subjected to mock trials, burned, and had their remains scattered. Many Sisters dispersed back into the general populace, settling down and passing the pariah gene on to their descendants, a genetic legacy that would continue to surface throughout human populations for millennia to come. But the restoration of the Sisters of Silence came at last, in the era Indomitus, when the resurrected Primarch Robert Guilliman recognized their value and ordered them return to a prominent position among the Imperium's defenders. Today, it is once again possible to see one or more Sisters of Silence aboard the Black Ships as they make their endless rounds through Imperial space. Their golden armor gleams in the harsh light of the containment holds, their bever-covered faces revealing nothing, their silence speaking volumes about the nature of their duty and the price they pay to fulfill it. Together with the Adeptus Custodes, they form what is known as the talons of the Emperor, the left and right hands of the Master of Mankind. The Custodes are his right hand, golden and glorious, visible to all. The Sisters are his left, silent and hidden, doing the work that must be done in the shadows. The Sisters of Silence may be the most vital crew members aboard the Black Ships, but they are far from the only ones. Operating a vessel of this size and complexity requires a crew that is, by Imperial standards, enormous. Black Ships maintain a crew several times larger than similarly sized vessels of the Imperial Navy, and the reasons for this are as much psychological as they are practical. The captains and senior officers of the Black Ships are, without exception, senior adepts of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, as these are individuals who have spent their entire careers within the organization, climbing through its ranks through a combination of competence, loyalty, and the kind of iron-willed mental fortitude that is absolutely essential for anyone who spends extended periods in close proximity to thousands of distressed, uncontrolled psykers. A Black Ship captain is not simply a void-farer. They are a manager of souls, responsible for the safe transportation of the most volatile cargo in the Imperium. And the consequences of failure are not merely the loss of a ship and its crew, but potentially the opening of a warp rift that could consume entire star systems. Below the senior officers, the rank and file crew of a Black Ship is drawn from a very specific and somewhat unusual source. The Astra Telepathica maintains ancient contracts with a number of Imperial worlds situated relatively close to Terra, as agreements that date back centuries or even millennia and have been renewed countless times over the ages. Under the terms of these contracts, the designated worlds provide a steady flow of recruits suitable for service aboard the Black Ships. In return, the worlds receive exemption from their standard Imperial tithes, a bargain that most planetary governors consider more than fair, given the alternative. These indentured workers form the backbone of the Black Ship's operational crew, one handling everything from engine maintenance to navigation to the day-to-day management of the ship's systems. They are, by and large, ordinary human beings, not psykers, not blanks, not genetically enhanced warriors, just people. People who have been rigorously tested and screened for any latent psychic abilities or sensitivities before being allowed anywhere near a Black Ship. People who understand that their service will be long, difficult, and psychologically damaging in ways that most Imperial citizens will never experience. Because serving aboard a Black Ship is, to put it plainly, a nightmare. The constant, soul-numbing despair that permeates these vessels is not a metaphor. It is a literal, measurable psychic phenomenon produced by the thousands of terrified, despairing psykers imprisoned in the holds below. Even with the wardings, even with the containment measures, even with the presence of the Sisters of Silence dampening the worst of it, the psychic emanations of so many distressed minds bleeding through the hull creates an atmosphere of crushing hopelessness that weighs on every crew member every moment of every day. To combat this, the crew are regularly subjected to mind-scrubbing procedures, a form of psychic hygiene that purges any taint or contamination they may have absorbed during their duties. The process is not pleasant. Accounts describe it as something akin to having the inside of your skull scoured with wire brushes, a sensation of being scraped clean from the inside out that leaves the subject dazed and disoriented for hours afterward. But it is necessary. Without regular mind scrubbing, the cumulative psychic exposure would eventually drive even the most mentally resilient crew member to madness. Yet the navigators who serve aboard the black ships are drawn exclusively from 3 specific navigator houses: the houses of Granicus, Ptolemy, and Macpherson. These houses have worked exclusively for the Astra Telepathica for as long as anyone can remember, their service to the fleet a hereditary obligation that has been passed down through generations of mutant psychic navigators. No other navigators are permitted to work aboard the black ships under any circumstances, and a restriction that ensures the navigational knowledge needed to guide these vessels through the warp remains contained within a trusted and controllable group. The secrecy surrounding these navigator houses is absolute. Their members do not socialize with navigators from other houses. They do not share their navigational charts, their techniques, or their experiences with anyone outside their own lineage. They are, in effect, a closed society within a closed society. Navigators who serve a fleet that operates outside the normal chain of Imperial command, sailing routes that are not recorded in any standard navigational archive, and visiting worlds that are not always on the standard charts of the Administratum. The knowledge they carry in their heads, the memories of warp currents and safe passages, and dangerous shoals that they have accumulated over centuries of service, is considered one of the most sensitive pieces of intelligence in the entire Imperium. If a navigator from one of these houses were ever captured by the enemies of the Imperium, the information they could provide about the black ship's routes and schedules would be catastrophically valuable to anyone who wanted to intercept the fleet. This is particularly important because navigating a black ship through the warp is significantly more difficult and more dangerous than navigating a standard Imperial vessel. The psychic cargo in the holds creates a kind of beacon in the immaterium, as a bright, screaming signal that attracts the attention of every predatory entity within sensing range. Warp journeys that would be routine for a Navy cruiser become gauntlets of horror for a black ship, the vessel constantly beset by creatures of the warp, drawn to the feast of psychic energy carried in its belly. The navigators must guide the ship through this maelstrom while maintaining the Geller field that keeps the vessel's interior protected from the raw stuff of the warp, all while being subjected to the same crushing psychic atmosphere that affects the rest of the crew. It is, by any measure, one of the worst jobs in the Imperium. And yet the crews of the black ships continue to volunteer, continue to serve, continue to make their endless circuits through the galaxy's star systems, collecting the Emperor's tithe and delivering their human cargo to Terra. Some do it out of duty, some do it because the alternative, refusing the service and losing their world's exemption from the Imperial tithe, is even worse. And some, perhaps, do it because they understand, in some deep and unspoken way, that what they are doing is necessary, that without the black ships, without the constant collection and management of humanity's psychic population, the entire Imperium would fall, the Astronomicon would go dark, the Golden Throne would fail, and the 41,000 years of human civilization that the Emperor fought and bled and died to preserve would come crashing down in a storm of psychic fire and demonic invasion. That knowledge is a heavy burden, but the crews of the black ships carry it, as they have always carried it, in silence and in darkness, far from the light of the stars they have sworn to protect. Let us turn now to the moment that every Imperial citizen, with even the faintest trace of psychic ability, dreads more than anything else in their entire existence. The moment when a black ship arrives in their system and the collection begins. The process typically unfolds like this. A black ship drops out of the warp at the edge of a planetary system, its dark hull catching the distant light of the system's star in a way that makes it seem less like a vessel and more like a wound in space. Sensors across the system detect the arrival, and within hours, transmissions are sent to the planetary governor, informing them that the time has come to prepare the customary levy. In some systems, this announcement is met with resigned acceptance, the population having been conditioned over generations to understand that the levy is simply another part of their obligation to the Imperium. In others, particularly on worlds where the last black ship visit was a century or more in the past, as the announcement triggers widespread panic and desperate attempts to hide psykers from the collection teams. The governor has been given standing orders. All psykers identified within their jurisdiction are to be collected, restrained, and prepared for transfer to the black ship. The collection is carried out by local authorities, the specific forces varying from world to world, but typically including elements of the Adeptus Arbites, local enforcers, Inquisitorial stormtroopers, and in some cases, dedicated agents of the Astra Telepathica who have been stationed on the world specifically to identify and monitor the local psyker population. On many worlds, psykers have already been identified and held in specialized facilities known as Sanctum Psykana, well-defended monastery prisons protected by Geller field engines and staffed by trained wardens who understand the dangers posed by their charges. Yet these facilities are built to contain psykers, not just physically but psychically, their walls reinforced with the same kinds of wardings that line the holds of the black ships, their corridors patrolled by guards equipped with specialized anti-psyker weaponry that most Imperial citizens have never seen and would not understand if they did. The Sanctum Psykana represents the Imperium's ideal for psyker containment, a controlled, organized system for identifying and containing psykers until the black ships come to collect them. The wardens who staff these facilities are a breed apart from the standard soldiers and enforcers of the Imperium. They are trained to deal with the unique challenges posed by psyker inmates, from the subtle manipulations of telepaths who can read their thoughts and influence their emotions to the sudden and explosive manifestations of untrained telekinetics, who might inadvertently crush a skull or collapse a wall in a moment of fear or anger. The wardens learn to recognize the signs of impending psychic events, the flickering lights, the dropping temperatures, the faint ozone smell that precedes a major manifestation, and they know how to respond with force that is precisely calibrated to subdue the psyker without killing them, because a dead psyker is a wasted resource. And the Imperium does not tolerate waste. But the reality, however, is often far messier than the ideal. Not every world has the resources or the institutional knowledge to maintain a proper Sanctum Psykana. On some worlds, psykers are simply rounded up by local militias and thrown into whatever holding facility is available, from converted warehouses to abandoned mining complexes to literal cages in the town square. The conditions in these makeshift holding facilities are often appalling, but with psykers subjected to abuse, neglect, and outright violence by guards and fellow prisoners who see them as something less than human. On other worlds, the local population takes matters into their own hands, conducting witch hunts of their own that frequently catch innocent people in their nets. A child who talks to imaginary friends, a woman who seems to know things before they happen, a man who gets headaches when storms roll in. As all of these can be enough to earn a trip to the holding cells and, eventually, a place in the holds of a black ship. The Imperium does not particularly care whether every individual collected is actually a psyker. It is better, from the Imperium's perspective, to collect 100 innocents along with one genuine psyker than to leave a single psyker uncollected on a world where they might eventually become a gateway for demonic incursion. When the black ship's shuttles finally descend to the planet's surface, the transfer begins. The collected psykers are brought to designated landing zones, where they are evaluated by the ship's adepts. This initial assessment is brief and brutal. a quick screening that sorts the psykers into broad categories based on their perceived power level, stability, and potential value to the Imperium. Those who are clearly tainted by chaos, those who show signs of demonic possession, and those who are deemed too dangerously powerful or corrupt to be safely transported are killed on the spot. There is no trial, no appeal, no opportunity to argue your case. The adept makes their assessment, and if the verdict is death, the sentence is carried out immediately, often by the Sisters of Silence who accompany the landing party. Those who pass the initial screening are loaded into the shuttles and taken up to the black ship itself. For many of these individuals, this is the last time they will ever see the sky of their home world, the last time they will breathe unrecycled air or feel the warmth of a star on their skin. Some of them are children, too young to understand what is happening, their small hands clutching at parents who are being held back by armed guards. Some of them are elderly, people who have managed to hide their abilities for decades only to be betrayed in the end by a neighbor or a jealous relative. And some of them are terrified adults in the prime of their lives, people who had families and jobs and futures that have been ripped away from them in a single, incomprehensible day. The Imperium does not see them as victims. The Imperium sees them as a resource, a tithe, a necessary sacrifice for the continuation of human civilization. And from the Imperium's perspective, that is exactly what they are. Because without them, without the constant flow of psykers from a million worlds, the Emperor would fall silent, the Astronomicon would go dark, and the human race would be consumed by the darkness that has been pressing in from all sides since the day the first psyker opened their eyes and saw the warp staring back at them. The Inquisition plays a crucial role in this process, and it is worth spending a moment on their involvement. Inquisitors who travel aboard the black ships are not merely passengers. They are active participants in the collection, using their authority and investigative skills to ensure that planetary governors are not shortchanging the tithe. A governor who withholds psykers from the levy is guilty of one of the most serious crimes in imperial law, equivalent to withholding military resources from a war effort. The consequences can range from personal execution to the total devastation of the offending world, depending on the severity of the offense and the temperament of the inquisitor who discovers it. This threat of inquisitorial oversight ensures that most governors comply with the tithe willingly, if not enthusiastically. There is no percentage in defying the black ships. The Inquisition will find out, and when they do, the punishment will be swift and merciless. Better to hand over the psykers and maintain the peace than to risk the wrath of an organization that answers to no one and has the authority to condemn entire populations to death. And so the collection continues, but world after world, century after century, the black ships making their slow, relentless circuits through imperial space like dark comets following orbits that span the galaxy. Each visit strips a world of its psykers, sending thousands of souls on a one-way journey to Holy Terror, where their fates will be decided by adepts who have never met them and who will never lose a moment's sleep over what happens to them. It is a system of extraordinary cruelty, a machine for the systematic exploitation of human suffering on a scale that beggars the imagination, and it is absolutely, utterly, terrifyingly necessary. If the collection process is a nightmare, then life inside the holds of a black ship is something beyond nightmare. It is an experience so profoundly horrible that those who survive it and go on to serve the Imperium in other capacities rarely speak of it. Not because they have been ordered to remain silent, though many have, but because the memory is simply too painful to revisit, too raw, too intimate, too fundamentally degrading to be shared with anyone who has not experienced it themselves. The containment holds of a black ship are vast, echoing spaces, each described as being as cavernous as a temple nave. They are cold, dark, and permeated with a low, constant hum that comes from the psychic wardings built into every surface. The air is stale and recycled, carrying with it the mingled scents of unwashed bodies, of chemical suppressants, and something else. something that defies description, but that every psyker aboard recognizes instinctively. It is the smell of despair, the psychic residue of generations of misery soaking into the very metal of the ship. The psykers are held in these spaces under conditions that can only be described as deliberately hostile. They are not merely imprisoned, they are actively suppressed. He was subjected to a battery of countermeasures designed to prevent any of them from accessing their psychic abilities for even a moment. The primary tool in this suppression is a device known as the occluding sphere, a strange metaphysical apparatus that is maintained by a troupe of specially trained adepts whose sole function is to focus their own psychic energies into the device. The occluding sphere broadcasts what can only be described as an invasive signal directly into the mind of every psyker within its range. This signal is not a sound, though some psykers describe it as being like a high-pitched whine that never stops. It is not a thought, though others describe it as being like having someone else's consciousness jammed into the space behind their eyes. It is something altogether different, a kind of psychic static that interferes with the psyker's ability to concentrate, to reason, to access the parts of their mind that connect them to the warp. Under the influence of the occluding sphere, even a moderately powerful psyker finds their abilities reduced to almost nothing, their connection to the Imperium smothered beneath layers of disruptive noise. But the occluding sphere is not the only countermeasure employed in the holds. In addition to the psychic suppression, the ship's crew also pumps oppressively loud and discordant noise into the holding areas. This is not music. It is not even recognizable as organized sound. It is a deliberately designed assault on the senses, a wall of auditory chaos that prevents the psykers from achieving even the most basic state of concentration or rest. The noise is constant. It never stops, never pauses, never varies. Hour after hour, day after day, for the entire duration of the voyage, the psykers in the holds are subjected to this unrelenting barrage of sound that leaves many of them unable to think clearly, unable to sleep, unable to do anything except huddle in their chains and wait for the noise to end. The combination of the occluding sphere, the noise, the wardings, and the presence of the Sisters of Silence creates an environment that is almost perfectly designed to break the human spirit. And that, of course, is exactly the point. The psykers in the holds are not guests, they are not passengers, they are cargo, and the containment measures are not meant to ensure their comfort. They are meant to ensure the ship's survival. Because a single psyker, in a moment of uncontrolled power, could tear a hole in reality that would flood the ship with the raw energies of the warp. And on a vessel carrying thousands of psykers, a cascade failure, where one psyker's loss of control triggers another's and another's and another's, how it could create a catastrophic warp breach that would consume the entire ship and everything in it. The most dangerous psykers, those identified by Inquisitorial scrutiny as being particularly powerful or particularly unstable, are kept in separate isolation cells deep within the bowels of the containment holds. These cells are even more heavily warded than the main holding areas, are lined with layers of psychically resistant material and protected by additional countermeasures that go beyond what is applied to the general population. The inmates of these cells are often sedated, drugged into a state of near unconsciousness that keeps their minds too clouded to access their abilities. Some are kept in this state for the entire journey, months or even years of drug-induced twilight from which they emerge, if they emerge at all, as hollow shells of the people they once were. Through all of this, the adepts of the Astra Telepathica conduct their assessments, moving through the holds with practiced efficiency, evaluating each psyker's potential value to the Imperium. This is not a compassionate process. The adepts are looking for strength, stability, and controllability, the three qualities that determine whether a psyker will be trained for service or consigned to the Astronomicon. They test the psykers using methods that range from the clinical to the openly sadistic, pushing their subjects to the edge of their endurance and sometimes beyond in an effort to determine exactly what each individual is capable of. The testing itself takes many forms. Some psykers are subjected to isolation, removed from the general population of the holds, and placed in sealed chambers where the wardings are intensified to the point where the psyker's connection to the warp is reduced to the faintest whisper, then gradually released to see how the psyker responds when their abilities begin to return. The adepts watch for signs of control, of discipline, of the ability to channel power without being consumed by it. Others are tested under stress and subjected to physical pain or psychological pressure to determine whether they can maintain their composure and their psychic containment when their emotions are running high. A psyker who lashes out with warp energy when threatened or frightened is marked as unstable. A psyker who can endure the same pressure without losing control is marked as potentially useful. The most disturbing tests involve deliberate exposure to the things that inhabit the warp. In controlled conditions, with Sisters of Silence standing by to intervene if things go wrong, psykers are made to lower their mental defenses and reach out into the Imperium. The adepts watch to see what responds. A psyker who attracts the attention of minor warp entities but maintains their composure is considered promising. A psyker whose mind is immediately besieged by more powerful entities is considered a liability. And a psyker who seems to welcome the attention, who reaches back toward the things in the warp with something other than revulsion, is considered irredeemably compromised and is marked for immediate termination. Those who demonstrate sufficient strength and mental discipline to maintain control of their abilities under extreme stress are earmarked for further evaluation on Terra. They will be given the opportunity, if opportunity is the right word, to undergo additional training and potentially be sanctioned for service in one of the Imperium's many organizations that make use of psykers. The rest, the weak, the unstable, the broken, are consigned to a different fate, one that we will discuss shortly. But first, consider the journey itself. A black ship does not travel from a single world directly to Terra. It follows a circuit, a predetermined route that takes it from world to world. Collecting psykers at each stop and filling its holds gradually over the course of months or even years. The voyage from the outermost reaches of the Imperium to Terra can take years, sometimes decades, depending on the conditions in the warp and the number of worlds that must be visited along the way. During this entire time, the psykers in the holds are subjected to the same unrelenting conditions. The noise, the occluding sphere, the wardings, the sisters, none of it lets up for a moment. And some psykers die during the voyage, their bodies giving out under the strain or their minds simply collapsing under the weight of the suppression. Others lose their sanity, their minds broken by the combination of psychic deprivation and sensory assault. And a few, a very select few, emerge from the experience stronger than they went in, their abilities honed by adversity, and their mental fortitude proven beyond any doubt. It is these survivors, and these diamonds forged in the furnace of the black ship's holds, who will go on to serve the Imperium as its most valued psychic assets. Sanctioned psykers, primaris psykers, astropaths, battlefield weapons of incredible power and terrifying capability. They will serve the Imperium faithfully and effectively, and most of them will die in that service, their lives spent in the defense of a species that has never really understood them and has always feared them. But at least they will have lives. The rest will not be so fortunate. When the black ship finally arrives at Terra, its holds full of the collected tithe from 100 worlds, the psykers aboard face a reckoning that has been building from the moment they were first taken from their homes. They are transferred from the black ship to the facilities of the Scholastia Psychana, the training division of the Astra Telepathica, where the sorting process that began aboard the ship is completed with a finality that leaves no room for appeal or argument. The psykers are evaluated one last time, subjected to a battery of tests that assess their power, their stability, their mental discipline, and their loyalty to the Imperium. Those who pass these final assessments are divided into several broad categories, each of which carries a very different fate. The strongest and most disciplined psykers are those who demonstrate the ability to channel the warp without losing control and who show no signs of corruption or instability are trained as sanctioned psykers. These individuals undergo a rigorous program of education and conditioning that teaches them how to use their abilities in service to the Imperium while minimizing the risk of warp-related incidents. Sanctioned psykers serve in a variety of roles throughout the Imperial military and government. So, from battlefield weapons in the Astra Militarum to advisors for planetary governors to operatives of the Inquisition. A subset of these sanctioned psykers, those who demonstrate exceptional telepathic ability, are selected for training as astropaths. The astropath training program is one of the most demanding and dangerous in the entire Imperium, culminating in the ritual of soul binding, where the psyker is brought before the Emperor himself, or at least before the ancient machinery that channels what remains of his psychic presence, and subjected to a process that permanently fuses a fraction of the Emperor's psychic strength to their own mind. This ritual is agonizing. Many psykers do not survive it. Those who do often lose their eyesight as their optical nerves are burned out by the sheer intensity of the Emperor's psychic presence. But the survivors gain a connection to the Emperor that protects them from the worst predations of the warp and allows them to serve as interstellar communicators, sending and receiving telepathic messages across the vast distances that separate the worlds of the Imperium. A smaller number of particularly promising psykers are identified by the Inquisition for recruitment as acolytes, beginning a career that may eventually lead them to the rank of Inquisitor if they survive long enough. These individuals often begin their journey to the Inquisition's ranks as unwilling passengers on the very black ships that they will one day ride as passengers of a very different sort. Their transformation from cargo to guardian, a kind of grim symmetry that speaks volumes about the nature of the Imperium and its relationship with its psychic population. Some of the most renowned Inquisitors in Imperial history started their careers chained in the holds of a black ship, their potential recognized by a keen-eyed Inquisitor who saw something in them that the standard evaluation process might have missed. These individuals carry the memory of the holds with them for the rest of their lives, and it colors everything they do, every decision they make, every psyker they encounter in the course of their duties. Even rarer are the psykers who are identified as being suitable for induction into a Space Marine chapter as librarians. These individuals, while typically young enough to undergo the rigorous physical and genetic transformation required to become a Space Marine, are handed over to the chapters for training, their psychic abilities augmented by the transhuman physiology of the Astartes to create warriors of extraordinary power and capability. Space Marine librarians are among the most potent psykers in the Imperium. Their abilities enhanced by advanced equipment like psychic hoods and force weapons, and refined by centuries of training and combat experience. But for every psyker who is deemed worthy of training and service, there are many more who are not. Those who fail the final assessments, those who are too weak, too unstable, or too far gone to be of any use to the Imperium in a combat or administrative capacity, are handed over to the Adeptus Astronomica. And this is where the true horror of the Black Ship's purpose becomes clear. The Adeptus Astronomica is the organization responsible for maintaining the Astronomicon, the psychic navigational beacon that makes interstellar warp travel possible throughout the Imperium. The beacon is generated by the Emperor's mind, his shattered consciousness directing a beam of psychic energy across roughly 50,000 light-years of the galaxy. But the Emperor, broken and dying upon his golden throne, can no longer provide the raw energy needed to sustain the beacon on his own. Instead, that energy comes from a choir of 10,000 psykers known as the Chosen, who are selected from the ranks of the Adeptus Astronomica's acolytes and placed in the chamber of the Astronomicon, a vast facility located beneath the fortress known as the Hollow Mountain in the Himalasian range on Terra. There, in that chamber, the Chosen do not simply channel their psychic energy into the beacon. They are consumed by it. Their psychic and life energies are drained by the Emperor's will, siphoned away to fuel the Astronomicon's light. The process is not quick. It can take days, weeks, or even months for a single psyker's life force to be fully consumed, but the end result is always the same. The Chosen die, their bodies burned out husks, their souls spent in service to a beacon that they never asked to fuel and that the galaxy cannot function without. Up to 1,000 of the chosen die every single day. Let that sink in for a moment. 1,000 human beings every day for 10,000 years. That is the price of the Astronomicon. That is the cost of keeping the lights on in the Imperium of man. And it is the black ships that pay it, delivering a constant, unending stream of psykers to Terra, so that the machinery of sacrifice can continue to function. Since the late 36th millennium, the demand has only grown. The Golden Throne, and that ancient and increasingly failing piece of technology upon which the Emperor sits, has required more and more psychic energy to remain functional. By the early years of the 41st millennium, the number of psykers required daily to maintain optimal power levels had quadrupled compared to earlier periods. The black ships increased in number and frequency in response, their circuits growing ever more ambitious as the need for psykers expanded beyond what the existing fleet could supply. This is the equation at the heart of the black ship's existence. On one side, the constant demand of the Golden Throne and the Astronomicon for psychic fuel. On the other, the entire psychic population of the Imperium, an ever-growing resource that must be collected, transported, evaluated, and ultimately consumed in order to keep the machinery of human civilization running. It is a monstrous equation, and a calculus of suffering that reduces human lives to units of energy to be harvested and expended. And it is the foundation upon which everything else in the Imperium is built. Without the Astronomicon, there is no warp travel. Without warp travel, there is no interstellar communication, no military logistics, no trade, no governance, no Imperium. The black ships are not merely a fleet. They are the circulatory system of the Imperium itself, and the veins and arteries through which the lifeblood of the Emperor's dying civilization flows. Cut them, and the entire body dies. The Astronomicon deserves a deeper discussion, because understanding what it is and what it requires is essential to understanding why the black ships are so feared and so necessary. The Astronomicon is not merely a tool of navigation. It is the single most important piece of infrastructure in the entire Imperium, thus the one thing upon which absolutely everything else depends. Picture, if you will, a lighthouse standing on a cliff overlooking an ocean of infinite darkness. The ocean is the warp, that roiling, screaming dimension of psychic energy and predatory consciousness that exists parallel to our own reality. Every ship in the Imperium that needs to travel between star systems must enter this ocean, must sail through its lightless depths. It must navigate currents of madness and tides of horror that would shatter the mind of any unprotected soul who looked upon them directly. The Astronomicon is the light of that lighthouse. It is a beam of psychic energy generated by the Emperor's will, projected outward from Terra in all directions for a distance of roughly 50,000 light-years. Human navigators, those three-eyed mutants who possess the ability to perceive the warp directly, use the Astronomicon as their primary reference point when plotting courses through the Imperium. Without it, they are navigating blind, sailing an ocean with no stars, no landmarks, no way of knowing where they are or where they are going. The Astronomicon existed before the Golden Throne. It existed before the Horus heresy, before the Emperor was broken and sealed inside the machine that keeps his ravaged body alive. In the earliest days of the Great Crusade, as the Emperor powered the beacon with his own psychic might, projecting it across the galaxy through the sheer force of his extraordinary will. But as the demands of the crusade grew, as the Emperor found himself pulled in more and more directions by the needs of his expanding empire, his advisor Malcador, the Sigillite, suggested a compromise. The Emperor would continue to direct and calibrate the beacon, but the raw energy required to sustain it would be provided by the sacrificial psychic energies of 10,000 psykers. The Emperor agreed to this arrangement only with the greatest reluctance. He made it clear that it was meant to be a temporary solution, a stopgap measure that would be abandoned as soon as he had completed the great project that occupied the bulk of his attention, the creation of a human-controlled section of the webway that would have rendered the warp, and therefore the Astronomicon, unnecessary for interstellar travel. But the Webway project was destroyed when Magnus the Red, in a catastrophic act of well-intentioned sorcery, tore through the Emperor's psychic shields and allowed demons to flood into the human-built tunnels. The Emperor was forced to abandon the project and focus his full attention on holding the breach closed, eventually being confined to the Golden Throne permanently after his mortal wounds during the climactic battle with Horus aboard the War Master's flagship. And so, the temporary arrangement became permanent. The Emperor still directs the Astronomicon, his shattered consciousness maintaining the frequency and calibration of the beacon, even in his current state of living death. But the energy comes from the Chosen, or those thousands of psykers who are trained by the Adeptus Astronomica and placed in the chamber of the Astronomicon to burn. The experience of the Chosen is, if anything, even more disturbing than the conditions aboard the black ships that brought them to Terra in the first place. These individuals are not simply killed. They are slowly, gradually, methodically drained of everything they are. Their psychic energies are siphoned away, channeled into the beacon, and projected across the galaxy by the Emperor's will. Their life forces follow their psychic energies into the void, leaving behind bodies that are progressively more hollow, more empty, more dead with each passing hour. Some of the Chosen achieve what the Adeptus Astronomica describes as a mystic state during the draining process, a transcendent experience in which they feel themselves becoming one with the beacon, their individual consciousness dissolving into the vast or shining light that guides the ships of the Imperium through the darkness. Whether this is a genuine spiritual experience or simply the last desperate coping mechanism of a dying brain is a question that the Adeptus Astronomica does not encourage its members to ask. The training that precedes the final sacrifice is, in its own way, almost more disturbing than the sacrifice itself. Young psykers recruited from the Astra Telepathica are initiated into the Astronomica as acolytes and taught not just how to use and control their psychic powers, but the philosophy and lore of the Astronomicon. They learn the value of their lives, which is to say, they learn that the value of their lives lies entirely in their deaths. They study the nature of the warp, the mechanics of the beacon, and the critical role that the Astronomicon plays in the continued existence of the Imperium. Yet they are gradually brought to what the organization describes as an inner understanding of the universe, a psychological conditioning process that prepares them to accept their fate with something approaching willingness, even gratitude. The organization is, in essence, a monastery of the doomed, staffed by instructors who have already accepted their own eventual consumption and who train their students in the knowledge that everything they teach is ultimately preparation for death. The acolytes wear blue hooded robes, their heads shaven, and when they are deemed ready, they receive the neural implants that will one day connect them to the chamber of the Astronomicon and begin the slow process of draining their life force to power the beacon. There is something almost serene about the accounts of the Adeptus Astronomica's internal culture, a calm acceptance of mortality that stands in stark contrast to the screaming horror of the black ship's holds. But the serenity is, of course, manufactured. It is the product of years of careful psychological conditioning designed to produce willing sacrifices, human beings who will walk into the chamber of the Astronomicon and offer up their lives without resistance, because they have been taught to believe that this is the highest honor a psyker can achieve. What is known is that the Chosen die. They all die, and they are replaced, continuously and without ceremony, as by the next batch of psykers delivered from the black ships. The machine of sacrifice grinds on, day after day, year after year, millennium after millennium, consuming lives by the thousand, in order to keep a single light burning in the infinite darkness of the warp. And the thing that makes this truly horrifying, the detail that transforms it from merely terrible to genuinely obscene, is that it is not enough. The Golden Throne is failing. So the ancient technology that sustains the Emperor's broken body is degrading, its mechanisms deteriorating in ways that the tech priests who maintain it cannot repair and barely understand. With each passing century, the throne requires more energy to function, more psykers to fuel its failing systems. The increase since the 36th millennium has been fourfold, and there is no reason to believe that the trend will not continue. The implications are staggering. If the throne's hunger continues to grow, the black ships will eventually be unable to collect enough psykers to meet the demand. And when that happens, when the supply of psychic fuel runs dry, the Astronomicon will go dark. And when the Astronomicon goes dark, the Imperium falls. This is the truth that lies at the heart of the black ship's existence. They are not merely a fleet that collects psykers. They are the last line of defense between human civilization and total annihilation. Every black ship that sails the void, every psyker that is collected from a distant world, every soul that is consumed in the chamber of the Astronomicon, they are all part of a desperate, failing effort to keep the lights on for just a little longer, to buy one more day, one more year, one more century for a species that is slowly, inexorably running out of time. And now we come to the crisis, the event that has shaken the black ships and the entire system they support to its foundations. But the Great Rift, the cicatrix maledictum, the cursed scar, call it what you will, the result is the same. A tear in reality itself, a raging galaxy-wide chain of warp storms that has split the territory of the Imperium in half and thrown everything into chaos. The Great Rift tore open at the end of the 41st millennium, triggered by a cascade of events that included the destruction of Cadia and its anti-warp pylons. In sorcerous rituals performed by Magnus the Red during the siege of the Fenris system, the awakening of the elder death god Inead, and the reaction of the Chaos gods to the resurrection of Reboot Guilliman. The exact cause is debated, but the effect is undeniable. A wound in space stretching from the Eye of Terror in the galactic northwest to the Hadex anomaly on the eastern fringe, dividing the Imperium into two halves, the Imperium Sanctus, where the light of the Astronomicon still reaches, and the Imperium Nihilus, the dark Imperium, where that light is faint, flickering, or absent entirely. The effect on the black ships has been devastating. The Great Rift has disrupted or outright destroyed many of the traditional routes that the black ships followed through the galaxy. Warp storms block passages that were once safe. Entire star systems have been swallowed by the rift, their populations consumed by the energies of the immaterium. Communications have been shattered, supply lines severed, and the carefully maintained circuits that the fleet had followed for millennia rendered impassable. In the Imperium Nihilus, the situation is particularly dire. The worlds beyond the Great Rift are, for all practical purposes, cut off from Terra. The black ships cannot reach them, the psyker tithes cannot be collected, and the populations of untrained, unsanctioned psykers on these worlds are growing, day by day, month by month, year by year. With no one coming to collect them, and no system in place to contain them. This last point is especially terrifying. Remember what we discussed earlier about the dangers of uncontrolled psykers. Remember the age of strife, when sorcerer kings and demon-possessed witches brought entire civilizations to their knees. Now imagine that scenario playing out across thousands of worlds simultaneously, on a scale that dwarfs anything that has come before. That is what is happening in the Imperium Nihilus right now, and there is very little that anyone can do about it. The cicatrix maledictum has also triggered a phenomenon known as the psychic awakening, a massive surge in psychic activity across the galaxy that has seen the number of psykers born on Imperial worlds increase dramatically. More psykers are being born, more powers are manifesting, and the warp is more active and more dangerous than it has been in living memory. The demand for black ship collection runs is higher than ever, but the fleet's ability to meet that demand has been severely compromised. Planetary governors on worlds that have been cut off from the black ships are being forced to implement their own restraints upon their populations of untrained psykers. Some have established improvised training facilities, or attempting to teach young psykers how to control their abilities without the benefit of the formal education provided by the Scholastia Psychana. Others have adopted a more straightforward approach, simply executing any psyker they identify, and hoping that the Inquisition does not come calling to ask why the tithe was not paid. On some worlds, the situation has deteriorated beyond recovery. Populations of uncollected psykers have grown too large to be contained. Their uncontrolled powers thinning the veil between the Imperium and the warp until demons begin to slip through. One at first, then two, then dozens, then hundreds, until the world is consumed. These are the silent catastrophes that are playing out across the Imperium Nihilus, the worlds that fall without anyone knowing and without anyone coming to their aid. Each lost world is not merely a tragedy for its population, it is a victory for the ruinous powers. There's another node in the growing network of chaos-corrupted territory that continues to expand as the Great Rift feeds power to the denizens of the warp. There are accounts, fragmentary and often unverified, of worlds in the Imperium Nihilus, where the uncollected psyker population has risen to such numbers that the collective psychic pressure of so many untrained minds has begun to warp reality on a planetary scale. Gravity behaves inconsistently. Time flows at different rates in different locations. What the dreams of the population become shared experiences, nightmares that thousands of people experience simultaneously, each dream feeding power into the warp and drawing the attention of ever larger predatory entities. On these worlds, the line between the material universe and the immaterium has become so thin that demonic entities can manifest without any deliberate summoning, simply bleeding through the weakened barrier, like water seeping through cracked stone. The populations of these worlds often do not understand what is happening to them. They know that their children are changing, developing abilities that no human should possess. They know that their dreams are becoming more vivid, more violent, more prophetic. They know that things are appearing in the shadows that were not there before, things that whisper promises and threats in equal measure. But they have no framework for understanding these phenomena, and no knowledge of the warp or its inhabitants, no comprehension of the cosmic forces that are slowly consuming their world from the inside out. All they know is that the black ships used to come, and they do not come anymore, and everything has been getting worse since they stopped. Even in the Imperium Sanctus, where the Astronomicon still shines and the black ships still operate, the situation is strained. But the increased frequency of psyker births means that the existing fleet is struggling to keep up with demand. Worlds that used to be visited once every century are now generating psyker populations that require collection every few decades. But the ships are not there to make the runs. Backlogs are building up. Sanctum Psychana facilities are overflowing. And the governors of imperial worlds are growing increasingly desperate in their efforts to contain a problem that is growing faster than their ability to manage it. The irony of this situation is not lost on those who study the history of the Imperium. The Great Rift, which was caused in part by the forces of chaos, has created conditions that are driving more and more human beings toward chaos. Every uncollected psyker is a potential gateway for demonic incursion. Every world that falls to the power of untrained witchcraft is a victory for the ruinous powers. And every black ship that is lost in the warp, its hull cracked and its cargo spilling into the immaterium, is a feast for the predatory entities that dwell in the ocean of souls. The black ships are fighting a war on two fronts now. On one front, they face the practical challenges of navigating a galaxy that has been torn in half, and of reaching worlds that were once on their regular circuits, but are now separated from them by impassable warp storms. On the other front, they face the existential challenge of maintaining the supply of psykers to the Golden Throne at a time when the throne's appetite is growing and the fleet's capacity is shrinking. It is a crisis that has no clear solution. More ships are being built, but construction takes time, and the orbital shipyards of Mars can only work so fast. Yet the Sisters of Silence have been restored to prominence by Guilliman's order, adding their anti-psychic capabilities back into the fleet's arsenal, but there are not enough of them to make a significant difference across the entire galaxy. And the Great Rift shows no signs of closing. If anything, it continues to spread. devouring more worlds and disrupting more routes with each passing year. The polyp Psykana, a radical faction within the Inquisition, he has begun to argue that the traditional approach to psyker management is no longer viable. They believe that humanity is becoming a psychic species, that the number of psykers will only continue to increase, and that the Imperium must find new ways to manage this growing population rather than relying solely on the black ships to collect and process every individual. Their ideas are controversial, bordering on heretical in the eyes of the more conservative elements of the Inquisition, but they are gaining traction precisely because the current system is so clearly failing. What happens next is anyone's guess. The black ships will continue to sail as they always have, making their rounds through whatever parts of the galaxy remain accessible to them. They will continue to collect the Emperor's tithe, filling their holds with the terrified, the broken, and the damned. And they will continue to deliver their cargo to Terra, where it will be sorted, assessed, and consumed in the fires of the Astronomicon. But the question that hangs over all of this, the question that no one in the Imperium wants to ask, but that everyone is thinking, is how long it can continue. How long can the black ships keep up with the demand? How long can the Golden Throne survive on a diet of psyker souls? And what happens when the ships can no longer deliver enough to keep the light burning? Before we close, there is one more subject that deserves attention. And that is the distinction between the black ships of the Astra Telepathica and the black ships of the Inquisition. These two fleets share a name and a color scheme, but they are separate organizations with different purposes, different structures, and different histories. The Inquisitorial black ships are special battle barges, not to be confused with the psyker collecting transports of the League of Black Ships. They were built by the Mechanicum of Mars at the request of Inquisitors, who felt that over-reliance on the Imperial Navy or Space Marines for their operational needs was unacceptable and potentially dangerous. These Inquisitors wanted their own ships, vessels that answered to the Inquisition alone, and the result was a class of warships that combined the power of a strike cruiser with that of a Navy battlecruiser. The design of the Inquisitorial black ships reflects their purpose. While where the Astra Telepathica's black ships are built for containment and transportation, the Inquisitions are built for intimidation and force projection. They are harbingers of imperial justice, vessels that arrive in a system as a clear and unambiguous message that the Emperor's law has teeth. They carry with them the authority of the Inquisition and the weapons to back that authority up if diplomacy fails. The physical appearance of these ships is deliberately designed to instill fear. Where normal ships of the Imperium have armored prows for ramming, Inquisitorial black ships have blunt prows, a subtle but significant departure from naval convention that immediately identifies them as something other than a standard warship. Where normal ships run with lights on at all times, both to prevent collisions and to illuminate the enemy during combat, Inquisitorial black ships run without lights, their dark hulls painted the same absolute black as their namesakes, moving through the void like shadows given mass and purpose. There is something deeply unsettling about seeing an Inquisitorial black ship for the first time. It does not look like a vessel of war. It looks like a hole in space, a place where the stars should be but are not, as if the ship has not been built so much as carved from the fabric of the void itself. The psychological impact of this design is deliberate and well documented. When an Inquisitorial black ship arrives in a system, the first thing that anyone looking out of a viewport or monitoring a sensor screen notices is the wrongness of it. It does not reflect light the way a normal ship does. It does not register on sensors the way a normal ship does. It appears as an absence rather than a presence, and that absence triggers something primal in the human mind, an instinctive recognition that something dangerous has arrived, and that flight, not fight, is the appropriate response. This is by design. The Inquisition wants its ships to inspire fear, because fear is one of the most effective tools in the Inquisitor's arsenal, and a population that is already afraid is a population that is more likely to cooperate when the questions start being asked. The armament of these vessels is formidable. A typical Inquisitorial black ship carries a dorsal bombardment cannon, port weapons batteries, attack craft launch bays in the prow, and torpedo tubes. Yet they are capable of engaging and destroying most threats they might encounter in the course of their duties, and in cases where a single ship is not sufficient, they can form the core of a battle group alongside Imperial Navy vessels and Space Marine strike forces. The ships of the Ordo Xenos carry Death Watch Space Marines, the specialized alien hunters drawn from chapters across the Imperium. The ships of the Ordo Malleus carry Grey Knights, are the secretive and extraordinarily powerful Space Marine chapter dedicated to the destruction of demonic threats. These specialist forces add yet another layer of capability to the Inquisition's fleet, making each black ship a self-contained instrument of the Emperor's will, capable of identifying, investigating, and eradicating threats that would stymie any other force in the Imperium. The Inquisitorial black ships normally operate alone, in a single vessel sailing through the void on whatever mission the Inquisition has assigned to it. They are secretive by nature, their movements tracked by no one outside the Inquisition itself, their destinations known only to the Inquisitor, or Inquisitors, who command them. When one appears in a system, it is often the first sign that something has gone very wrong. A world does not receive a visit from an Inquisitorial black ship because everything is fine. It receives a visit because someone, somewhere, has drawn the attention of the most feared institution in the Imperium, and the consequences of that attention are about to become very, very real. The history of the Inquisitorial black ships stretches back to the era of the Horus Heresy, when their presence was noted alongside the earliest operations of the Proto-Inquisition. They have served the Emperor's justice for 10,000 years, their dark hulls bearing witness to wars, purges, exterminations, and acts of heroism that the general population of the Imperium will never know about. They are the Emperor's silent blade, wielded in the darkness by men and women who have been given the authority to do whatever is necessary to protect humanity from the threats that surround it on every side. And while they share neither purpose nor organization with the black ships of the Astra Telepathica, they share something equally important, a reputation. What the name Black Ship carries with it a weight of dread that transcends institutional boundaries. It does not matter whether the black ship that has just appeared in your system is there to collect psykers or to investigate heresy. What matters is that it is there, and that its presence means that something dark is about to happen. Something that will change lives, end lives, and remind everyone in the system that the Imperium's authority is absolute, its reach is infinite, and its justice is cold. And so here we are, at the end of our journey through the darkened corridors and wailing holds of the most feared ships in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. We have walked the length and breadth of the black ship's existence, from their origins in the earliest days of the Imperium to the crisis that threatens to overwhelm them in the current era. We have met their crews, their guardians, their prisoners, and the ancient institutions that command them. We have looked into the chamber of the Astronomicon and seen the 1,000 souls that burn there every day, their lives consumed to keep a single light shining in the darkness. And what have we learned? We have learned that the black ships are many things at once. They are instruments of survival, collecting the psychic tithe that keeps the Astronomicon burning and the Golden Throne functioning. They are instruments of control, managing humanity's growing psychic population and preventing the kind of catastrophic warp events that nearly destroyed the species during the Age of Strife. They are instruments of cruelty, subjecting their cargo to conditions that would be condemned as torture by any civilized standard. And they are instruments of necessity, performing a function that no one enjoys, but that everyone acknowledges must be done. There is a quote attributed to an unnamed captain of a black ship that, I think, he captures the essential truth of the fleet and its mission better than any academic analysis could. The captain is recorded as saying, "I knew their fate. They had been tested and found wanting. They were too vulnerable, too dangerous to live. Souls such as these I carry to the Emperor's table." There is no malice in those words, no cruelty, no sadism, no pleasure in the suffering of others. There is only the cold recognition of a duty that must be performed and a fate that cannot be avoided. The captain knows what their cargo is. They know where it is going. They know what will happen when it arrives. And they carry it anyway, because someone must, and they are the someone who has been chosen for the task. That is the black ships in a single moment. Duty without joy, service without reward. The willingness to do terrible things, not because they are good, but because the alternative is worse. It is a philosophy that pervades every level of the Imperium. From the lowliest foot soldier in the Astra Militarum to the high lords of terror themselves. And it finds its purest, most distilled expression in the dark hulls and wailing holds of the black ships. Another account comes from a guardian of the Adeptus Astronomica, who once served aboard one of these vessels. They described counting 20,000 souls bound for service in a single voyage. Men, women, and children, young and old, the sick and the sound. Or they said they could sense the pain of their cargo, could feel their chains as if the restraints were bound around their own body. But they also understood that the decision of who would live and who must die was not theirs to make. They were a guardian. They carried souls to the Emperor's table. Nothing more, nothing less. The black ships are, in many ways, the perfect symbol of the Imperium itself. A system that is simultaneously essential and monstrous, that preserves humanity while degrading it, that saves lives while consuming them, that inspires both awe and revulsion in equal measure. The Imperium of man is not a kind civilization. It is not a just civilization. It is a civilization that exists because the alternative is extinction, and it will do whatever is required to keep that alternative at bay, no matter the cost in human suffering. The black ships are the physical embodiment of that bargain. Every psyker who is torn from their home and loaded into the holds, every soul that is consumed in the fires of the Astronomicon, every family that is destroyed when the collection teams come knocking, they are all the price of continued existence. The Imperium pays it every day, without hesitation and without remorse, because it knows that the alternative is not a kinder, gentler society. The alternative is the screaming void. The alternative is demons pouring through uncontrolled psykers, like water through a broken dam. The alternative is the end of everything. And so the black ships sail on, as they have for 10,000 years, making their rounds through the galaxy's star systems, collecting the Emperor's due. Their dark hulls cut through the void in silence, their holds echoing with the cries of the damned, their crews bearing the weight of a duty that would crush the spirit of anyone less committed to the Imperium's survival. They are feared, and rightly so. They are hated, and understandably so. And they are absolutely, utterly, terrifyingly necessary. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods, the black ships offer no comfort and no mercy. They offer only continuation. One more day, one more year, one more century of human existence, purchased with the lives and souls of those who were born with the curse of psychic power. It is not hope. It is not salvation. It is survival, raw and unadorned, paid for in a currency of human suffering that would make even the dark gods pause to admire its efficiency. And somewhere out there, in the vast reaches of imperial space, a black ship is making its approach to a world that has not seen one in 100 years. The planetary governor has received the transmission. The collection teams are being assembled, and in the hablocks and manufactorums of a dozen cities, men and women with strange dreams and stranger powers are feeling the first cold fingers of dread wrapping around their hearts. The black ships have come, and nothing will ever be the same again. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most fascinating and terrifying elements of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Every like, every subscription, every comment helps the channel grow, and lets me know that you want to see more content like this. If you have a topic you would like me to cover next, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and your suggestions have a real impact on what I choose to cover in future videos. Until next time, stay relaxed, stay curious, and may the Emperor protect.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.